March 19, 2002. It's the middle of the night and a blacked-out van is speeding through the streets of London. Inside are several British police officers and at least one Secret Service agent. Their target? A seemingly unimportant flat in the Wood Green district. Once they arrive, the officers jump out of the van and rush towards the apartment. They quickly break down the door and immobilize a young man and his girlfriend. However, these two aren't their main objective. Instead, it was their computers. The officers quickly confiscate both of their PCs and every data storage device in the apartment. The man, Gary McKinnon, is thrown into the back of the van, and he can only watch as the agents illegally take away his possessions. The same night, all the confiscated items are immediately taken onto a private plane and sent to the United States, specifically to the Department of Defense headquarters known as the Pentagon.
A British hacker accused of breaking into Pentagon and NASA systems.
What a U.S. prosecutor calls the biggest military computer hack in all time.
I was in search of suppressed technology, referred to as UFO technology. I think it's the biggest kept secret in the world.
Did you find what you were looking for?
Yes, there's UFO technology.
The US said they wanted him extradited.
I appeal to Obama and to Gordon Brown. Do they want the first computer hacker ever to be extradited to be a guy looking for UFOs?
The Americans say McKinnon is a cyber terrorist who caused almost £500,000 worth of damage to military computers.
This video is sponsored by Guardio, but more on that later. It's 2 a.m., and while everyone is sleeping, Gary McKinnon is sitting at his PC. He's smoking some pot and reading through some private documents pertaining to the University of Oxford. However, he has nothing to do with the university. In fact, he had never even been there. But hacking Oxford University, as well as several businesses, was only a test run, a preparation for his ultimate goal, hacking into the U.S. government. Without going to bed, he resets his system, lights his joint, and immediately starts scanning IP addresses of the Pentagon for vulnerable ports, and after only a few minutes, he finds one. An open 139 port. Its purpose is to run the NetBIOS service, which basically shares files across different devices inside its network. And once it was compromised, it gave McKinnon a straight path to the Pentagon's network. McKinnon floats through the network and quickly finds an active machine to connect to. However, it asks for a password, but McKinnon tries something unusual by just clicking on the connect button. And it worked.
So you're saying that you found computers which had a high-ranking status, administrator status,
Yep.
which hadn't had their passwords set. They were still set to default.
Yeah, precisely.
The next step was to install the remote control software remotely anywhere onto the computer he had access to. And once again, everything worked. Over the next few months, McKinnon used this machine to infiltrate other computers, all while reading through a bunch of classified files. He comes across a strange Excel file with the headline, quote, "Non-Terrestrial Officers," unquote. The document contained dozens of names that were part of some, quote, "fleet-to-fleet transfers," unquote. This was McKinnon's first major win, and a sign that he was on the right track to find hard evidence of UFOs. Coincidentally, Stephen M. Greer published his book Disclosure around the same time McKinnon made this discovery. The book is a collection of hundreds of governmental and military personnel testimonials about UFOs. And one of those testimonials was from a woman called Donna Hare.
During the 70s and 71, I worked in the Building 8 of NASA for a contractor, Philco Ford. I walked into the photo lab, and in one of the photo panels, I saw a round white dot. I said, "Is this a UFO?" And he's smiling at me, and he says, "I can't tell you that. I can't tell you that."
As we've seen, Hare provides the precise location of where the alleged UFO photo manipulation took place. And in the book, she adds that Building 8 was part of the Johnson Space Center. McKinnon didn't need anything else and got to work. By using the same technique as before, he got access to the Johnson Space Center's network and quickly found an unprotected machine. McKinnon used this computer to scan the network for comments about Building 8, And sure enough, there were a bunch of machines associated with Building 8. But in contrast to the military, most of these computers were secured. However, McKinnon only needed a single unprotected machine. Via this computer, he managed to modify network privileges to get access to every other computer, and he began his search through Building 8's secret material. He came across lunar films, strange aerospace technology, and a bunch of other stuff he had never seen before. But one thing was still missing: evidence of UFOs. Furthermore, McKinnon had now spent several hours scooping through Building 8's computers, and it was about to be time for Building 8's employees to get back to their offices. McKinnon should have logged off for the day, but decided to connect to one more computer. And this time, there were only 2 folders on the desktop: processed and unprocessed. He pauses for a second, takes a hit off his joint, and clicks on the unprocessed folder. Dozens of files begin to load in a file format he's never seen before. He quickly clicks on the first file, and suddenly a small line appears on the screen. Moments later, it expands downwards. It's a picture. McKinnon then looks at a clock he has set to U.S. time: 7:59 a.m. Only a few minutes are left before Building 8's employees start working. Time is ticking, and the image is still loading, and it might be McKinnon's only chance to find proof to validate his UFO obsession.
What came onto the screen was amazing. It was a culmination of all my efforts. It was a picture of something that definitely wasn't man-made. It was above the Earth's hemisphere. It was cigar-shaped. It had geodesic domes above, below, to the left, to the right, and both ends of. And although it was a low-resolution picture, it was very close up. This thing was hanging in space. The Earth's hemisphere was visible below it.
However, at the same time McKinnon was celebrating, one of Building 8's employees got into his office, and to his surprise, one of the computers was turned on. Suddenly, McKinnon sees the cursor quickly move on its own and... But what if there was a way to avoid being hacked and to always stay safe? Hold tight as I introduce you to our sponsor, Guardio. Guardio is a browser extension and a mobile app that protects you from harmful links that hackers might send to your email, phishing attacks from any source, dangerous downloads, and annoying pop-ups. Guardio has a bunch of awesome features, but my favorite is their special identity monitoring system. We all know that big companies are getting hacked every few days, and hackers then steal your data to sell it to other criminals so that they can use it for nefarious purposes. And Guardio's system immediately alerts you when such a data breach occurs, or if your data is found in some obscure corner of the web. This way, you can act fast, secure your leaked data, and avoid anyone impersonating you or targeting your other accounts for more sophisticated hacking attempts. Go get the free security scan they offer to see which threats are already on your device by visiting /guard.io/thinker. You'll get 20% off and a 7-day free trial of the premium features. So, if you want to be safe, go to guard.io/thinker or use the link in the description and check out their affordable premium plan for full protection. Let's get back to the video. National Infrastructure Protection Center, Washington, D.C., early 2002. It's late in the evening when the phone suddenly begins to ring. One of the employees answers the call and receives an unexpected message. One of the military's websites had been hacked. U.S. foreign policy is akin to government-sponsored terrorism these days. It was not a mistake that there was such a huge security stand-down on September 11 last year. I am Solo. I will continue to disrupt at the highest levels. A few hours later, the phone begins to ring again, and sure enough, it's another mysterious message. And this time, it simply said, "Your security is crap. Solo." Over the next few weeks, Solo's messages begin to pop up in the networks for the NSA, the Navy, the DoD, and even the FBI. Something weird was going on, and as the specialists began to trace the attackers' footprints, they all pointed towards one country: England. Specifically to the Wood Green district. And eventually, they found out exactly which building the attacks were originating from. March 19, 2002. McKinnon is talking with his girlfriend when the police burst through his door, arrest him, and confiscate everything that could have been used to perpetrate his acts.
They broke the law as well. They took my hard drive over there and kept it.
However, because McKinnon was arrested under the Computer Misuse Act, the British police told him that if he confessed to his crimes, it would land him no more than 6 months of community service. McKinnon agreed to confess to his crimes and expected to serve his 6 months. However, this isn't what happened. Only a few weeks after his arrest, the U.S. issued an arrest warrant for McKinnon. They alleged that McKinnon had done a lot more than read some files, and accused him of 7 counts of computer-related crimes in 14 U.S. states.
Next thing I know, in November 2002, 6 months has turned into 60 years in an American jail.
Why do they think that sentence is suitable for you?
They're trying to scare everyone away from not doing it. So I'm the anti-hacking poster boy, you know.
That's why you think they're trying to impose such a serious sentence. Why are they saying they're imposing such a serious sentence?
They say I've damaged every machine I was on. Also, they say that for it to be an extraditable offence, it has to be worth a year in prison. For it to be worth a year in prison, it has to be $5,000 worth of damage. And as if by magic, lo and behold, every machine I'm on is $5,000 worth of damage.
So even though McKinnon had already made a deal with the UK authorities and agreed to confess to his crimes, he was now in danger of spending the rest of his life in an American prison. All that was needed was for the US to issue an extradition request to the UK. And this is exactly what happened. It was the middle of the night when someone knocked on McKinnon's door, and to his surprise, 2 Scotland Yard police officers were waiting for him. They took him to the police station and explained that the extradition proceedings were about to start. However, McKinnon's mother and his lawyer, Karen Todner, were quick to move, and he was granted bail the very next day. But one thing was very clear. Unless McKinnon and his team produced a master plan, he would spend the rest of his life in an American prison. McKinnon's first enemy in the proceedings was Mark Summers, a lawyer who represented the United States. He went on to defend the U.S. allegations about all of the damage McKinnon had caused, claiming that it was a calculated and intentional move to harm the U.S. government. However, McKinnon's side fought back by claiming that the U.S. had never provided evidence to any prosecutors. And this was supported by the British Crown Prosecution Service, who would later say, "The evidence we have does not come near to reflecting the criminality that is alleged by the American authorities." Strangely enough, even without any substantial proof, the UK's Home Secretary, John Reid, confirmed McKinnon's extradition in July of 2006. But McKinnon's team had been preparing for this moment by requesting appeals to every related authority, and even though they were always rejected, it slowed down the entire extradition process. But the most important thing they did was to rally the public against the UK-US extradition treaty.
It is simply wrong for this government to have signed a treaty in secret which sells our rights down the river while it protects the rights of American citizens, and it's certainly wrong to send a vulnerable young man to his fate in the United States when he could and should be tried here instead. It is simply a question of doing the right thing. Gordon Brown once said he had a moral compass. Well, it seems to me on this issue he seriously lost that moral compass. He should find it fast, try Gary McKinnon here at home, protect his rights, but also protect the rights of all British citizens.
You see, under this extradition treaty, the US can request the extradition of any UK resident without providing any evidence for the crimes the person supposedly committed. All the while, the UK must be able to provide evidence that the person has committed a crime to request the extradition of a US resident. And this anti-extradition movement got so big that it eventually reached the House of Commons in 2011, where Dominic Raab called for a serious review into the extradition law. He mentioned Gary McKinnon's case as the prime example for the need to change, and called to inject a dose of common sense into the blunt extradition regime. Eventually, the situation got so heated that the UK's Prime Minister, David Cameron, had to set up a meeting with Obama about the extradition issues.
On your second question, Mr. McKinnon, it is now in the hands of the British legal system. We have confidence in the British legal system coming to a just conclusion, and so we await resolution and will be respectful of that process.
But even though Obama seemed to be okay with the UK prosecuting McKinnon, leaks from late 2009 show a different picture. In these leaks, Prime Minister Gordon Brown secretly asked the Obama administration to let the UK handle the case. However, his request was shot down, in private. Furthermore, during talks between U.S. diplomats and McKinnon's lawyers, one diplomat claimed that some people in their government wanted Gary McKinnon to, quote, fry, insinuating an execution via the electric chair. Coincidentally, these notes mysteriously disappeared from McKinnon's lawyer's office only days later, and the laptop used by an accompanying solicitor to transcript the meeting was also stolen from his car. So, whether or not the U.S. ever wanted a fair trial, or even respected Gary McKinnon's life, is a good question. However, back to the story. After the meeting with Obama, David Cameron announced that Home Secretary Theresa May had taken up the responsibility to make the final decision on the extradition. After years of fighting, and after exhausting every option they had, they were about to receive their final verdict.
Since I came into office, the sole issue on which I have been required to make a decision is whether Mr. McKinnon's extradition to the United States would breach his human rights. Mr. McKinnon is accused of serious crimes, but there is also no doubt that he is seriously ill. He has Asperger's syndrome and suffers from depressive illness. The legal question before me is now whether the extent of that illness is sufficient to preclude extradition. As the House would expect, I have very carefully considered the representations made on Mr. McKinnon's behalf, including from a number of clinicians. I have obtained my own medical advice from practitioners recommended to me by the Chief Medical Officer, and I have taken extensive legal advice. After careful consideration of all of the relevant material, I have concluded that Mr. McKinnon's extradition would give rise to such a high risk of him ending that a decision to extradite would be incompatible with Mr. McKinnon's human rights. I have therefore withdrawn the extradition order against Mr. McKinnon.
As you probably noticed, Theresa May mentions that McKinnon is seriously ill, and this is something that played a major role in the extradition battle. In 2008, McKinnon was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, a neurodevelopmental disorder in which the person has difficulties with social interaction, along with restricted, repetitive patterns of behavior and interests. This helps explain why he was so obsessed with UFOs. However, he had also been diagnosed with severe depression a bit later. The combination of these two disorders was extremely dangerous, and McKinnon's doctor claimed that if he were to be extradited, he could not only be a great danger to others, but also to himself. His terrible physical and mental condition, in addition to the reviews of the extradition laws, ultimately led to Theresa May blocking the extradition. However, not only was McKinnon psychologically damaged by this 10-year-long battle, his mother, Janice Sharp, was also heavily impacted by the decade-long fight.
How has the whole case affected your life and that of your nearest and your dearest, apart from Gary?
Well, it basically puts it on hold. You can't do anything because you don't know what the future holds. And because it's my son, it's on my mind every second, every waking second of every day. I think how I can fight it, who I can contact, what I can do, so you don't have another life. Also, as far as earning a living, it's very difficult because you don't have the time. This is 24/7. People imagine we've got campaign headquarters. We don't. We have me in front of the computer. And I sit till 4 o'clock in the morning sometimes. I can't stop. And so for Gary, it's the worst of all because only he is literally facing being dragged across there. But for everyone, it's actually 8 years of torture.
You see, Sharp was more than just McKinnon's emotional support. She organized and attended all the protests and rallied thousands of people to support their cause. By doing this, she not only saved her son, but also played a major part in the creation of an update to the extradition law known as the Forum Bar, which would allow British courts to suspend any extradition if they felt the need to do so.
To bring in Forum so that this hopefully won't happen to anyone else is absolutely incredible. Sorry. It's been an emotional roller coaster, so I'm not very articulate today. I'm overwhelmed. I'm incredibly happy. I want to say thank you, Theresa May, because it was an incredibly brave decision to stand up to another nation as strong and powerful as America. Is rare, and she had the guts to do it. And I always felt that she had the strength to come through and do this, and to also change the extradition treaty. It's us all together. We've done it. We've won for the little person, not just the elite or the privileged, but for the little person. And that is, an incredible achievement. And thank you to everybody here, because you've all done it, every one of you. Thank you.
For this segment of the video, we'll look at the famous FLIR UFO video that was verified by the Pentagon in 2019, over 15 years after McKinnon's hack, and compare it to McKinnon's discovery. First of all, McKinnon said that it was cigar-shaped. We can see that the Tic Tac UFO is not exactly cigar-shaped. However, David Fravor, one of the pilots, said that it was around 40 feet long, so a Tic Tac or cigar shape would be a fitting description for the craft. Next, it does seem to have domes in the middle, on the bottom and the top of the craft, but whether it has any domes on the extremes is something we can't tell. Furthermore, David Fravor confirmed Gary McKinnon's description of a surface that didn't have any crevices or visible control elements such as wings. Lastly, even though it might seem obvious, Fravor also said that the craft came from space, which would match the final detail of the picture, which had been taken in low orbit. So even though there are over 15 years of difference in between Gary McKinnon's discovery and the release of the Tic Tac video, they seem to be eerily similar. It's also worth noting that the Tic Tac incident happened in 2004, and even though it was reported by all pilots, Fravor claimed that it was never officially investigated, which, given the circumstances, seems pretty odd, and is something that Fravor also highlighted during his testimony. But it gets even stranger when we realize that McKinnon's extradition process and the Tic Tac incident happened around the same time. It's almost as if someone wanted anything related to UFOs, and in particular this type of craft, to remain in the dark. But let's move away from the Tic Tac incident and compare McKinnon's extradition case to some other UK hackers that infiltrated the US government but were never extradited. First, we have Richard Price, who hacked into a bunch of different US security departments, NASA, and even Korean nuclear facilities in the 90s. It was so bad that the US said he was, quote, causing more harm than the KGB, unquote. But they never went after him as much as after Gary McKinnon. Next, we have Aaron Caffrey, who shut down the US's busiest port in 2001 and caused millions in losses for American shipping companies. Despite this, the US never pushed to extradite him. And lastly, we have Andrew Harvey and Jordan Bradley, who created a virus that infected thousands of machines from 2001 until 2003, causing millions in damages for companies and individuals in the US. Both of their trials were in the UK. It just seems odd that the US did everything in their power to extradite McKinnon, when in comparison to the previously mentioned hackers, he didn't do much harm. So I guess the final questions are, what was the real intention behind the extradition? And did McKinnon see what we know today as the Tic Tac UFO?